to reveal the legend within Story Festival, world-class speakers, interviews. And today I have the great pleasure of welcoming Elizabeth Patterson to the Shed TV stage. Elizabeth has this fascinating story about an elephant, an art piece that she bought, and what that taught her about life. And she basically says that if we ignore the elephant in the room, we're at the risk of shaping our whole lives around it. So I can't wait to bring this to you because it's fascinating and it's emotional and it's a deep lesson that many of us just need to hear so that we can not ignore the elephant in the room anymore. So welcome, Elizabeth. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Melanie. It's wonderful to be here.
Okay, so do tell us all about this elephant that you bought one day at an art fair or art exhibition.
Yeah, so it's a deeply personal story that ended up impacting almost every aspect of my life, actually. And it started out so innocently. I like to say I lived with an actual elephant for 15 years, an elephant in the room, my family room to be exact. But so what happened was very inconspicuously, innocently, a friend called and last minute and said, "Will you go to this art show with me?" And I said, "Sure." I wasn't doing anything and no intention whatsoever of purchasing anything. I felt like it's all way out of my range and no way will I come home with anything. Well, the next day I went back to the gallery to pick up a 50-pound, it's very heavy, 50-pound ceramic
Yeah.
elephant. It's about 24 feet, 2 feet tall, 2 feet wide. And that was how the whole thing started. I had no clue at the time what it would come to represent for me.
Yeah, and it's such a beautiful story around the elephant and this part that it played in your family, and such a poignant thing that you learned from it. But before we get to that, tell us about the moment that you were at your mother with your mother in the care home.
So it was interesting because this was fast forward, I would say about 5 years or so. And my life, personally and work wise, was, I like to say, wonderful on the outside. I had three beautiful children. Um, we, we had a wonderful life in many ways. And yet on the inside, I was sort of unraveling actually. And I wasn't where I wanted to be work wise. It wasn't fulfilling. I had essentially just sacrificed unknowingly a lot of myself. And in the midst of all this, I think my three boys were on the cusp of adolescence. My mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And it was very, very early. I was an only child and we were exceptionally close. We're in the same town. And so I had sort of had a suspicion, but of course, hearing it out of the doctor's mouth, it was crushing. I mean, you're never ready for the reality to actually hit. I was holding out and praying that maybe, I was wrong. Um, so that sort of started the journey, a journey with her. And of course, our relationship shifted as it went on. But what was interesting for me was am a very stubborn person. And, I have this sort of attitude that if I want something, I'm going to make it happen. And from hell or high water. And so I sort of took on her. I'm an only child, as I said, so I was the sole caregiver, and I sort of took on her diagnosis with that same mentality. And we're gonna power through this, and this is not going to change our life, and we're not going to, be impacted. This is not going to get us, kind of thing. And my mother was an incredibly bright, well-educated, physically fit, very, very active person when this happened. She was young. So we just weren't ready for it, obviously. And So I went into the senior care manager's office with this attitude of, I'm going to beat this thing. I'm going to go in. I was a box ticker. I'm going to figure out a plan, get a strategy, leave here, put it into place. And we're not going to have to deal with this like the books say we are, right? So I go in, and it was the most pivotal moment because I wasn't expecting it. It sort of shook me at my core, because instead of giving me a plan of care and here's what will probably happen medication wise and here's what you need to do, here's what you can expect, she essentially said to me, there are no cures for this. There's medicine that will slow it down, but the biggest thing that you can do, the most helpful, most compassionate thing you can do for your mother, is to start seeing things through her reality, to step into her reality. And I think she could sense sort of the person type of personality I was. And she said, you're going to rob her of her dignity if you continue to deny what's going on for her and try and pull her into your reality. And it was, it really, I mean, I still remember it to this day, and it was in 2005. So it happened many years ago. So that was how my journey with Alzheimer's began, and it was how my whole, I guess, mindset began to shift around not just her care, but the larger implications of acknowledging reality that way.
So that's the key piece, isn't it? It's the acknowledging the reality, and that's where the elephant in the room came into play. Because you realized that you were literally living with an elephant in the room, but metaphorically as well. And that's about the lens through which we see life, that those are realities. So tell me now about what you've learned from all of this.
So it was interesting when you use the word lens, because that is the word that the case manager used. She said, your mother is looking through the world, looking at the world through a different lens. And I think that was the piece that really struck me. And as it was just interesting the way her journey and that lesson ended up sort of integrating into my own personal life, my marriage, my work life, and everything. And going back to my elephant, he from the day I brought him home, he was literally in the middle of our family room, and I was going about life and extremely busy, and I have an aging father too that I was caring for, and obviously the three boys. And um, I don't know, but the irony of having an elephant in the middle of the room never really struck me. Um, and I guess it was really a matter of um, going so hard and so fast and trying to shape things and make things work and keep things afloat, that just ended up causing me to hit a wall. Physically, I was physically exhausted. I was mentally exhausted. I was emotionally overwhelmed. And I had this habit every evening of going into our family room after everybody was asleep, because having a quiet house was so unusual. And so I had to sort of steal those moments when I could. And so it was usually late at night. So I went in sort of typically like I did. I always lit a candle. I had a book, and I was literally too tired to do anything that night except for stare straight ahead. And I don't know if you've ever felt that tired, but you just sort of like you
Yeah.
don't even have energy to do anything. So that's where I was that night, and I look up, and literally in front of me is this huge elephant staring at me. And he was like part of our home at that point. And for whatever reason, I sort of looked at him, and I thought in the quiet of the night, we've got an elephant in the room. I've got an elephant in the middle of the room. And it was, at that point, the irony struck me, because I thought, I can't do this anymore. I'm telling myself I can do it, but I can't raise three boys and handle my mother's care the way I wanted to. And I was building a business at the same time. And I realized how I was in eroded marriage, and I was still trying to hold everything up and keep it afloat. And I had this vision of what I viewed as success, and I just was stubborn. I didn't want to let go of it. And I realized that night I sort of had a epiphany, and I thought, in the same way that I was denying what was going on with my mother, I was actually denying what was going on with me, and I had lost my identity. That was the biggest irony of it. I realized I had lost my identity. I really didn't have. I was going so hard. I didn't really have a sense of connection to myself at all anymore, and it was impacting every aspect of my life. And so that was how all that came to be.
And it's, I love that identity piece. It's just that by ignoring your needs, the elephant, you created this whole other world, this whole other reality. And
Mhm.
that's where the disconnect comes in your explanation. And
Yes, because oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, and I was going to say, and I know that you know that once you actually know what you're doing, or there's something around denial and denialism and legacy and identity. You
Right.
explain. You're the expert.
So, most people tend to think of denial as essentially just not acknowledging, what's right in front of you, a problem that or a challenge that is too difficult to acknowledge, and that is the case with many instances in many situations. But denialism is when you begin to deceive yourself, and you're not only refusing to acknowledge a problem, but you're refusing to acknowledge what it's doing to you, and you begin to sacrifice yourself in the process of denying. So it starts out with one issue, and then it expands and expands and expands, and that turns into what's known as denialism, which is extremely harmful, and it really does impact. In the worst case scenario, it impacts your whole identity.
So I love that you deny something exterior, but denialism is actually a denial of self within that.
Mhm.
And that's when you're saying you literally end up building a life in in a completely different direction to what you really want it to go in, and
Right.
you lose yourself in it, that identity. So I mean, how do we know whether we are, what are the symptoms of potentially of us having an elephant in the room?
um, well, I think that it really it really boils down to, at its essence, your sense of connection with yourself. And um, it's part of it's, I guess, mindfulness, and part of it is when you look around, is your life, is your work, is your day-to-day life a reflection of who you are? Where are your values showing up, or are they not showing up at all? And what was your vision for yourself for the future? And is that happening for you? Is that showing up in the way that it's not about just disappointment or life taking a turn that you didn't plan on. It's really about a complete lack of alignment with where you are versus where you want to be, and where you need to be to really to reach your potential and to be happy. It's part of its work and potential, and then it comes down to just sheer happiness. Because I know for me, I wasn't showing up as a parent, I wasn't showing up as a caregiver, as a daughter, certainly professionally, in the way that I wanted to. And I think that was really the thing that hit me the hardest.
Right. So you just mentioned our life is a reflection of us. So if you're looking at it and you don't like what you see, then
Mhm.
you probably need to have a look at what you're denying, and what you and readjust the lens, as it were, to see the world in a different way. But one of the ways that you talk about us being able to do it is legacy. Is it just that we need to think about legacy, or how is legacy helpful?
Well, I think for me, for a lot of the women that I work with, it's really important to make a difference in the world around you with through your work or through whatever capacity. Maybe it's a hobby and interest, but being able to have an outlet where you really feel like you're making an impact, you're influencing someone or something for the better. Um, in that sense, it's about legacy, because I know for me, I felt like what was going on for me was I was the wheels were churning, um, and the machine was moving forward, but really nothing was happening. It was just a matter of getting through each day as opposed to really making a difference. And so I think that's where the legacy piece comes in, because it's really about contribution and making a meaningful contribution to
And
the
that
world.
isn't charity work. That's feeling like you're making a good contribution as a parent, as a daughter, as a friend, that it's not, you're not just marking time, showing up and, I don't know, acting it, that you're really
Right,
contributing in
right.
every of those interactions. So if there was one takeaway that you wanted us to go away with after this conversation, what would it be?
I think the takeaway is that we all have a choice. You know, denial is, for a lot of us, it's a means of self-preservation on one level. We turn to it. It's human nature to use denial. So I'm not talking about that kind of denial. Again, I'm talking about like really being honest with yourself and looking at, is your life in alignment with where you want it to be in all the different facets. And I think at the end of the day, what I realized was I had a choice. And if I didn't choose to change and acknowledge what was going on for me, that it was going to take over me, it was going to end up shaping my life. And I had the choice to control it, right, and change the trajectory. So I think that if I can bring any sort of positive change to people's lives, it's helping them to acknowledge that so that they can make that choice and they can make that change.
And obviously these are very disruptive choices and a lot's changed for you, but would you say it was worth it? I mean, obviously you would, otherwise you wouldn't be telling us, but would you say it was worth it?
um, I I think sometimes um, you don't really realize where you are, like how deep you've sunk until you get out of it. And that was definitely the case for me. And I felt dead inside. And I didn't really, it had become such a habitual part of my life that I didn't even realize that. So it made a huge impact once things started to shift. And now looking back, 7, 8 years ago now, my whole life's done a 180. So I'm flourishing mentally, emotionally, and with my work in a way that doesn't even compare to where I was.
Isn't that amazing? And do you still have the elephant?
Absolutely, I still have the elephant.
So we can keep the elephant, but we can change the whole world. That's
Well,
a,
he's gone back to being a wonderful, beautiful piece of art now.
yes, as opposed to the elephant in the room. Elizabeth, I love the way that you reflected on what you learned and this beautiful story you tell with your mother, and being able to enter into her life, being able to see it through her lens. It's such an example of compassion and empathy, and the gift that she gave you in that moment to see your life in a different way and be able to 7 years later be something else and someone else is truly extraordinary. And I really appreciate you bringing it to the festival stage. I hope that people will come and hear your story in more depth and maybe take a workshop with you on the day. And I'm sure that it's going to be wonderful to have more of that story for us to hear in more depth and more detail. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Melanie, for having me.
And we will see you at the festival. Thank you.
Thank you.